welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rafae, Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be talking about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's address to the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Of course, we know it's been a very happening week regarding Pakistan's diplomatic front, as we've seen Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif engaging with the United Nations General Assembly and also holding meetings on the sidelines of this United Nations General Assembly's 79th session. In that regard, we also saw a lot of developments on Pakistan's diplomatic front as Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He held a meeting earlier with the chief advisor to the Bangladesh's new government, Dr. Muhammad Yunus. He also held meetings with the Palestinian president. He also held meetings with the Secretary General of the United Nations and subsequently meetings with the MD of the IMF, with the heads of the World Bank and other world leaders and heads of multilateral organizations. And we saw a lot of developments, good developments coming out of these meetings. In that regard, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif also addressed the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. It was a much anticipated address as there were a lot of speculations going on about the Prime Minister's address. What's the agenda going to be? But regarding that, we saw that it was a very detailed and a very comprehensive speech made by the Prime Minister that covered various aspects regarding the issues faced by Pakistan and the issues faced by the region and the world at large. If we go to the details of the Prime Minister's address, it's a 193-member Assembly of the United Nations which he addressed to, and he touched upon multiple regional and international issues such as the Palestine and Kashmir dispute, where he said that like the Palestinian people, the Kashmiri people have also been struggling for their right to self-determination, and has said that the oppressors, there's been countless voices from the international community regarding those oppressors, those committing these atrocities in these lands, to stop. But we've seen that the oppressors in both the case of Jammu and Kashmir occupied and Palestine, we've seen that the oppressors, they continue with their atrocities despite world calls to halt them. And the Prime Minister also touched upon the Ukraine war, the African nations. He talked about climate change, and of course he highlighted how Pakistan has been suffering even though Pakistan contributes less than 1% of the global carbon emissions. And he also made reference to the 2022 floods in which Pakistan had to bear a lot of losses amounting to nearly $30 billion. And the Prime Minister also he raised the issue of rising poverty. He talked about debt burden, and he also talked about inclusivity and the rising issue of Islamophobia that the world faces. Regarding Palestine, the Prime Minister also demanded that Palestine to be admitted as a full member of the United Nations. He criticized India for oppressing the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir and for ignoring the United Nations Security Council resolutions. He also issued a stern warning to India, stating that Pakistan would respond decisively to any aggression along the line of control. And that also the Prime Minister mentioned Pakistan's war against terror and how Afghan soil is being used to carry out cross-border terrorism. And he also made reference to the interim Afghan government that Pakistan has been time and time again reiterating on them to stop and take action against these militant outfits that are using Afghan soil to carry out their nefarious designs in the region. And he also shed light on regional cooperation and connectivity such as China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the efforts for connectivity with the Central Asian states, and different other aspects as well. We'll be talking about all these different elements and more that is to come with regards to the Prime Minister's address at the United Nations General Assembly. In the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. Along with that, we've been joined by geopolitical analyst Faisal, and on Skype, we've been joined by Brigadier retired Waqar Khan, who's a senior analyst. I'll start off our conversation from Brigadier Waqar and ask him regarding the Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations General Assembly. Of course, it started off with the recitation of a verse of a Holy Quran, and the immediate topic that was highlighted was the Palestine and Kashmir issue. The Prime Minister said that like the people of Palestine, the Kashmiris have also been suffering since the past 70 years, and they continue with their struggle for right to self-determination. How would you comment on the Prime Minister's address regarding these two topics?
I think Prime Shehbaz Sharif expressed the sentiments of the people of Pakistan. And if you look at Pakistan's traditional stance and the policy stance, had been consistent in the UN General Assembly, and we really feel about people of occupied Kashmir and people of Palestine. And both of these issues were, I think, very emphatically highlighted very strongly. And then, of course, it was in relation to the current environment, the genocide by Israelis taking place in Gaza, and the expanding war in the Middle East. Definitely, everybody is worried about it. He also, I think, highlighted, actually painted the picture about the genocide and the miseries being suffered by Palestinians, including women and children. There are thousands of people who are still buried. And on the other side, we had seen, Netanyahu's speech, which was boycotted by, I think, Pakistan and most of the Islamic countries. On Kashmir, again, I think there was a strong voice. He very clearly highlighted that India has to abide by UN Security Council resolution and cannot violate international law. And what is happening to Kashmiris is a lot of resemblance with what has happened to the Palestinians, because on one side we have the Zionists, on the other side we have the Hindutva flag. There is almost a similar agenda, similar toolkit. We talked of militarization of occupied Kashmir. We had 900,000 Indian soldiers. Almost, every street is occupied by some Indian soldier. He also, I think, tried upon Islamophobia and specifically targeted India, where he felt that 200 million Muslims are being targeted because of Islamophobia in India, and it needs to be definitely addressed at international level. He also talked of the environment. So I think the key factor or the key points were occupied Kashmir, a very strong voice for the people of occupied Kashmir, where the fast elections are taking place. Palestine, Israel-Palestine conflict, where there's a genocide going on, and I think it was a very brave stand, very clearly reflecting the aspirations of people of Pakistan, and also reflects the future course of action for Pakistan that's not going to compromise on its principal stance on both of these issues.
Well, very rightly said, but I think it doesn't affect just the people of Pakistan, it also affects the people of the region, and Pakistan has very prominently highlighted that how the hegemonic designs of one particular regional stakeholder, they're a threat to the collective peace of the entire region, and how these hegemonic designs of one country, they're also exploiting another country in the region as by using them as proxies to, of course, destabilize the region at large. Raja Faisal, with regards to that, I'd like your comments.
Yeah, when obviously it comes to terrorism, of course, it has been highlighted by Prime Minister at UNGA 79th session, and I think it was, of course, much needed one, and we expected in yesterday's program as well that he will be highlighting that, and in a sense that, of course, if we look at today's Afghanistan, the provinces, the bordering provinces of Afghanistan with Pakistan, they are not only a threat to Pakistan now, but of course they are a threat to regional countries as well as the worldwide threat. They can turn that into that as well. But of course it was important to highlight, and furthermore he did highlight about CPEC as well, and why CPEC in terms of connectivity between the countries and amongst the countries is so important and pivotal for especially the underdeveloped and developing world, because they can, of course, get benefit out of it as well. And he highlighted CPEC's progress, and he highlighted how it can be expanded with the plans which SIFC already has drawn, and SIFC is, of course, playing a pivotal role in that as well. So these were the points which were highlighted in context to the terrorism as well, because if we ultimately see that in recent times the attacks which were being carried out on CPAC or the Chinese, especially in Pakistan, there was a clear indication that, of course, somebody sitting across the borders, maybe in the eastern borders or maybe across the world somewhere, they are having some designs to, of course, halt the progress between Pakistan and China's CPAC, and ultimately there are forces, unseen forces, who are against this progress, because when we see Pakistan's, Pakistan's economy, CPEC is going to be the backbone of the economy in coming future. And we know that Pakistan advocates, and of course China advocates, that Central Asian republics, they must be somehow attached through better connectivity to the CPEC, so that it can be extended, CPEC can be extended to Central Asian republics and ending up to Russia. So this has been highlighted, and I think the way economy, it was being seen, Pakistan's economy was being seen as it is in trouble for the last 2 years or more than 2 years. But now, of course, Prime Minister openly highlighted in front of everyone, saying that we had to make very tough decisions under the circumstances, and there are many circumstances which can be drawn from this. Of course, one is that the Ukraine war is going on, and war itself is affecting the developing world, including Pakistan. And if we talk about Pakistan's economy, it was facing problems. Climate change was playing its role as well, in terms of Pakistan was worst hit by climate change, and he rightly pointed out that Pakistan is one of the countries that has of course less than 1% of carbon emissions, and when it comes to getting affected by climate change or global warming, Pakistan is one of the top 10 countries. So it was important to highlight, and of course very recently we saw that the floods 2 years ago, the floods in flash flooding in Balochistan, and then static flooding in Sindh, that actually destroyed infrastructure, destroyed livelihoods of people, destroyed crops of the people. Agriculture sector was hit by that as well. Overall, the estimates, which were not only made by Pakistan itself, but the other organizations from abroad, they made their estimates, and it was around $30 billion of Pakistan's economy. It was of course lost. And when it comes to climate justice, Pakistan seeks that justice, and that's why Prime Minister has rightly highlighted it at UNGA. And this is not a problem for Pakistan, but of course Pakistan's Prime Minister was on behalf of other nations, developing nations and underdeveloped nations as well, that are facing similar problems, the floodings and climate change problems. Then he spoke for them countries as well, and it was important to do. It felt like he wants to, of course, have his own group of the countries that are underdeveloped, and they are developing world, and they are trying their level best to, of course, maintain the economies. But these are the challenges which are not self-created challenges, but the whole world is contributing, especially the countries that are that have already excelled in terms of industries and all. Their burden is being, of course, put on the shoulders of the developing world, and it was important to highlight that, so that again and again putting emphasis on this fact would, of course, make the developed world think seriously about it. And he highlighted that $100 billion of the fund which is required to counter all of these problems, that should not only be raised in time, but of course to be spent in time as well, so that the countries that are being hit by climate change, they can, of course, they can cope with the challenges they are facing. So to me, I think it was a very well thought of speech by the Prime Minister, and the way he highlighted the core issues at UNGA, it was very timely, and of course it was important.
Well, of course, Raja Faisal, there's a lot of important points that you mentioned with regards to the Prime Minister's address, and we'll be deliberating upon them as well, such as climate change and equitable development. And the Prime Minister has very rightly he's raised the issues being faced by Pakistan, but not only Pakistan, the issues being faced by the developed world. And he's raised his voice collectively for the issues being raised by the developing world, and how there needs to be efforts for equitable development of these countries as well. With regards to that, Farrukh Pitafi, I'd like your comments with regards to the security aspect. The Prime Minister talked about the Palestine issue, he talked about the Kashmir issue, and he talked about how India has been committing atrocities, how Israel has been committing atrocities, and at the same time he talked about the rising tide of Islamophobia that we've also seen in the Western countries, in Europe and other parts of the world. With regards to that, how do you think these go hand in hand with one regional player with its hegemonic designs also promoting Islamophobia? There's Israel promoting Islamophobia, and we've seen the repercussions that go on in Europe, such as the recent riots that happened in the UK.
Right, Rafae, thank you very much for the question. Right off the bat, I think that I have to actually congratulate the government of Pakistan, the Prime Minister in particular, his economic team and his foreign policy team for this very successful visit. I think the ramifications, the impact of this visit are going to be felt years from now. On one side, of course, regarding our economic situation, the way very swiftly and smoothly we have concluded our affairs with IMF, and the fact that today Pakistan got the first tranche of that as well, that deal, that also speaks volumes. Similarly, the people that the Prime Minister met, the leadership of various countries and the UN itself, I think that speaks volumes for this, about the success of this visit as well. Having said that, if you have seen our yesterday's program, as Faisal was also pointing out, we actually outlined all these affairs that were discussed by the Prime Minister. What I was not anticipating was the moral clarity on display. I think on Palestine, I did not think that a better speech could be made. It was so clear. And there were clear deliverables. There was an emotive moral appeal also. I think that once again the Prime Minister needs to be congratulated on both Palestine and Kashmir. And the speech actually packed many things together, from moral clarity to accomplishment of the country, sacrifices of the country, right? And then because he also quoted a stanza from Edgar A. Guest's poem, that is Don't Quit, which reminded me of another poem by, P.B. Shelley, that is Mask of Anarchy. I thought that there was poetic whimsy also included. So that was very gripping, very appealing speech. And I think that regarding hegemonic designs of various countries, we have actually. The point that I wanted to make before I head towards that question is that yesterday I actually pointed out that it is important because now you don't have non-aligned movement, you don't have the kind of voice for the protest of the world. So Pakistan, because Pakistan is not a superpower, right? Superpowers go, they dictate their terms or they speak out and they come back. Countries like Pakistan, mid-range powers, they have the capacity to speak or become the voice of the oppressed or the people who are voiceless. And I think that right from Africa to Asia, because the Prime Minister actually mentioned Africa also and the conflicts elsewhere, to Afghanistan, especially speaking for the daughters of Afghanistan and human rights in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister actually did fulfill that job as well. And remember that when it comes to Islamophobia, Pakistan has contributed hugely in formally getting this issue recognized by the UN. And now what is important is to remember how this whole thing actually started and how it has actually been spreading all over the world. There are two countries, you pointed out very correctly, Israel and India, which in 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, when this book by Huntington was written called Clash of Civilizations, these were the two countries that were actively using the word terrorism. And then, because now there is BJP in India, Narendra Modi in India, and Netanyahu in Israel, now they insist that both these terms be used interchangeably with Islam. And that actually gives rise to further Islamophobia. The way India has been actually using Islamophobia inside the country and outside, and the way Israel has once again been unleashed in the region. Remember that it was 1980s, 1982's Lebanon invasion that shook the morality or the conscience or even of the West. And they started asking. That was when they decided to come up with the propaganda ministry and the way they have been propagating, because the arguments, whichever arguments they were using, for example, Golda Meir's argument that we can forgive them, the Arabs, for killing our children, but we will never forgive them for making us kill their children. Just look at the technique of manipulation here. In one sentence, you take away all the agency and all the blame from Israel and just throw it on the Arabs, right? We are not doing anything. They are making us kill themselves, right? This kind of obnoxious propaganda, this kind of Islamophobia has been going on for quite some time. Now it is time to push back. If you want an equitable world, if you want a world where we can all work together, of course, no one should actually resort to anti-Semitism. No one should resort to anti-Hindu propaganda either. But Islamophobia and these two sponsors of Islamophobia have to be identified and confronted. And this is what Pakistan is trying to do now.
Yeah. Well, and a very important step in that regard, as it's clearly been highlighted how, and of course, there should be action by the international community as well, because these are the facts that, but not just Pakistan highlights, but before the world, as we've been seeing in the recent past, there were incidents as the Western countries, US, Canada, and other countries have also been highlighting these issues with regards to their sovereignty and integrity. Brigadier Waqar, there was also talk of the Ukraine war, and subsequently there was also talk of inclusivity. And how do you think these two add up? Because in the Ukraine war, we saw the statements from the Western countries, how they were praising NATO as having a success in the Ukraine war, but on the other hand, the facts say otherwise.
I think Ukraine is a very sensitive issue, and again, this is a tragic thing that civilized nations have not been able to stop it. There are definitely reasons why Russia reacted, 3 years back, because of expansion of NATO, and it basically created not only a problem for the region but for the entire world, because a lot of pressure on, developing world, developing countries, mid-level powers to take sides, whereas probably we don't have much to do with it because it's happening. It's a European issue. We've seen even Shankar being pressurized. I think Pakistan has adopted a very balanced approach. We are definitely part of the Eurasian Brotherhood. We have members of the SCO, and Pakistan is going to host the SCO in mid next month. And then probably Pakistan will be attending the Brig summit, and also Pakistan has put up its bid. There's a support coming from BRICS countries other than India. Then we are talking of the North-South corridor, where Pakistan has agreed that it will be joining us, basically a strategic connectivity corridor, which benefits Europe, Asia, and connects it with basically Indian Ocean. And then, of course, you've seen visits by the Russian Deputy Prime Minister very recently before the, I think, UNGA, and he met all the important stakeholders in Pakistan. It indicates Russian interest. We've seen the Chinese Prime Minister is going to be here in the SCO summit as well. And we also have seen exchange of very good messages between President Xi and Prime Minister Shehbaz. So Pakistan has to definitely balance it out, not compromising on its let's say vital interests and maintaining good relations with East and West. But I think wherever there is talk of peace, Pakistan has raised that there is need for international community to basically finish these wars and then look for collective security and collective development. So I think Pakistan has a very, very balanced policy.
A very responsible speech, and of course how there's a balance between the two, and of course promoting peace, not taking anyone's side but promoting peace for the betterment of the world. That's what Pakistan has done. With that, Brigadier Retired Waqar Khan, a senior analyst, thank you for your time and being part of the conversation. Raja Faisal, I'd like your comments as well when we talk about inclusivity. There's so much conflicts going on in the world. There's heightened tensions we see in the Middle East and South Asia with regards to occupied Jammu and Kashmir. There's also conflicts going on in African countries. When we talk about a global peace, global inclusivity, the Prime Minister has also in his address, he talked about a call for justice and peace, and he particularly said the weak are not voiceless. How do you comment on that with regards to the ongoing conflicts in the world?
Yeah, excellent statement it was. Of course, there is a voice, and of course, our Prime Minister, he has shown that he has become the voice of the weak, especially when it comes to underdeveloped and developing world. They have faced so many challenges, be it Ukrainian crisis, or be it Middle Eastern crisis, or elsewhere in Africa. Of course, we know there are many African states as well which have been seeing unseen forces fighting each other there. But of course, the drawback for them country was that their economies were shattered, and people at large, they were being affected. I remember, I think yesterday's show, Farrukh highlighted the Sudan's issue as well. What is happening in Sudan, it is so alarming, but nobody is paying any attention to people out there, and that needs to be, of course, highlighted. And I'm happy that Prime Minister of Pakistan, he has highlighted these issues. And overall, remember, Rafae, when initially the Ukraine crisis started, the very year the worst hit was Africa, because Africa relied on the wheat imports from Ukraine, and they had shortage of grain. There were so many other countries as well who had shortage of grain, and this is how the food shortages, and when we talk about the United Nations fighting to, of course, overcome the malnutrition problems of Africa, they were facing troubles and problems as well. Countries like Russia, countries like Ukraine, with a very minimum of population, and at the same time vast land for of course grain cultivation, they were the countries who were actually a great resource for the grain shortages to be filled. And with that war, of course, world saw that there were problems. Suddenly we saw that the energy crisis, it was hit not only the underdeveloped world, but the developed world of Europe was facing problems as well. So people at large, they are facing problems, be it west or be it east. These kind of conflicts, of course, they sort of play a very negative role in the progress of the population at large of any country, I must say. So I think it was important to highlight these issues. And when we talk about the rights of the people, it shouldn't be that one people can be treated differently and the other one very differently. I mean, we have been seeing in both of the conflicts, the ongoing conflicts which are being seen on the Western screens right now. If we talk about Middle Eastern crisis, I mean, equation was all clear that whatever Israel is doing, they are not going to, of course, call spade a spade. And what they are going to do is they are going to rather justify the genocide or justify the atrocities which are being committed by Israeli forces and Netanyahu's designs, and the justification coming from the Western world, it was double standards. I mean, we always used double standard. To me, I think it was the only statement which was coming from that side. I mean, when we talk about Gazans, their children, their women, their elderly, indiscriminately under the bombings they were being killed, still are being killed. Few were being killed in the churches, few were being killed in the mosques, few were being killed in the United Nations shelters, and nobody cared about it. There were shelter after shelter, there were UN school after school, they were being bombed, and kids and their mothers and the elderlies, they were getting killed out there, but nobody paid any heed to it. Rather they said that, oh, it is a collateral damage, while IDF is searching for for Hamas, or somehow they are trying to of course recover the people who were kidnapped by Hamas. I mean, under the guise of some kind of operation, the only operation which was apparent to the whole world, and that was the genocide is underway in Middle East, and nobody saying anything about it. When it comes to Ukraine, of course, they will never talk, as Brigadier Waqar rightly pointed out, that before the war started, there were, of course, vibes that NATO was getting an extension into Ukraine, and they wanted Ukraine as a member, which would have ultimately meant that the missiles would be put in Ukraine, and that would be an ultimate threat to Russia. And whatever Russia did, it was to, of course, somehow give a clear message to the Western world that it would never allow. And at that time, of course, we saw, I'm not someone who's pro-war or pro invasion, but somehow this is the justification which was given by Russia. But overall, all I want to say is the whatever the bases are, or whatever the initiation points are of any war, they should be, of course, looked into quickly, and the peace must be of course restored wherever the war is. And when we talk about the responsibility of the powerful countries, there is far more responsibility of the powerful countries, rather than giving arms after arms for war. They must pressurize the countries like Israel to stop war, rather than asking for more weapons and they providing them with the tools of genocide.
For Pitafi, the weak are not voiceless. We saw that this is what the Prime Minister said, but as we've been seeing in the United Nations General Assembly, as it was continuing and as it started off, we earlier saw that there were pager blasts in Lebanon, there was bombardment started in Lebanon, and of course it started as the whole world was gathered at the United Nations General Assembly. Of course, that didn't stop Israel, but Pakistan's Prime Minister, he highlighted, and not just only for the Muslim community of the world, he said this in regards to the wider context of a call for justice and peace. How would you comment on that?
I think that the Prime Minister is absolutely right in calling for that. And not only that, we should not be treated as voiceless, and that is why it is imperative on countries like Pakistan to be the voice of the so-called voiceless, right? I want to actually, there are three conflicts that were mentioned earlier, and I just want to individuate and point out that each conflict has its own importance, and we should be actually treating them differently, and you have to appreciate what are the dynamics at play. Let us start by mentioning Sudan. I mean, I'm astounded, and it is so frustrating that nobody pays attention to Sudan the way it should have been paid attention to. In a single night, Rafae, 14,000 people in Darfur were reportedly massacred. In one night, 14,000 people, right? And this continues, and it has been continuing for more than 1 year. And the world community seems either uninterested or totally helpless in stopping that. And I hope that because of that civil war, the kind of toll, the kind of mass exodus that has taken place, history, the past year's largest exodus was not in Gaza. It wasn't in Ukraine, it was in Sudan. And that is why it is important to keep your eye on every conflict, because that has its own dynamics and realities. And remember, just because people might be in one continent or the other, it doesn't change the value of human life. Having said that, now let us turn to what Israel is doing. Beyond any shadow of doubt, Israel has once again proven that it is the bully of the region. It is an apartheid state when it comes to how Netanyahu has been carrying out his policies in the within Israeli occupied regions. And beyond that also, they are consistently bullies. There is a beautiful documentary. I recommend everyone to watch it. I hope it is available now on YouTube as well. Otherwise, you can find it on Vimeo. It is called Occupation of American Mind. Sajjali is reporting. And that is about Israel, the way Israel has actually, after the 1982, Beirut attack and invasion of Lebanon, the world started actually, world was shaken, that we kept on considering Israel as this small democracy, a beacon of hope for the region. And all of a sudden, your beacon of hope has turned into this bully that invades other people's homes and destroys their lives. So after that, there were meetings upon meetings. I told you about the kind of propaganda they used. They actually hired American consultants, and after that, they actually invested heavily in, flipping American mind and European minds. And because of that, they have actually permeated into the system. And they have this incredible influence. For example, now Netanyahu is not using Jewish people in America to be his voice. Where he goes, he usually goes to the people who are actually anti-Semitic, evangelist, because they believe that Israel, in order for the second coming of Jesus, Israel has to be fattened up into this huge state, which then Jesus is going to come and destroy. That's why they need to invest there. And because of that kind of alliances, even American Jews are protesting against what is going on in Israel. But there's an old saying in Urdu, है जुर्म ज़ईफ़ी की सज़ा मर्ग मफ़ाजात. The price, the cost of or the punishment for the crime of weakness is death of your interests. And this is the biggest problem. There are rich countries surrounding Palestine. They're Muslim countries. And had they, by the way, 2 countries have actually started doing that, actually 3. But the kind of money they have, if they used it intelligently over past decades to actually create the kind of soft power, the impact would have been much different. These 3 countries are, of course, Saudi Arabia, UAE, whose president actually met president of the US also, and the third one is Qatar. I think these countries should be teaching all of us courses on how to actually carry out or build relations, because the only way to counter that kind of negativity is to be smart about it, right? And finally, Ukraine. Look, Ukraine's story is very difficult to appreciate, and why Pakistan, India and other countries might be in such a quandary. Back in 1996-97, of course, when Russia was coming up as the West's ally, at that time I had actually started saying that Pakistan might have been part of the Cold War on the other side, but Pakistan needed to actually build bridges with Russia and work on this Eurasian opportunities, so-called Peter the Great's access to hot waters and all that. And Pakistan could actually play a very good role. After that, of course, a lot has changed. But Pakistan has been building up this momentum to build bridges with countries, because in the end, what you have got, had there been no 9/11, Pakistan was just abandoned, right? Nobody was going to remember who Pakistan is. And it was all India. So Pakistan had to keep on building that relationship. And then there is this honest, serious issue with Ukraine. Ukraine has its own identity, it keeps on reinforcing that. And you don't want it to go away. I was speaking to one Ukrainian and he said that you keep on asking us to stop war. So here's the down low. The fact is that if Russia stops fighting, the war is over. Russia is there, but war is over. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine is gone. Ukraine is no more there, right?
Yeah.
And this is in effect what was stated by President Trump yesterday, that Ukraine is gone, right? So with that kind of state of affairs, you have to empathize. Of course, what Faisal was pointing to, both these countries, Russia and Ukraine produce a lot of world's food grain. And because of that, sub-Saharan Africa is devoid. There has been a lot of poverty and hunger there because of this. Sub-Saharan Africa and even in Middle Eastern poor countries, right? Poorer countries in Middle East. Because of that, this war should end very soon. I hope that it does. But it shouldn't be at the cost of existence of a country. And if the world actually started, right now the state is such that everybody is treating the other one as the hostile one, right? Because of that and hardened positions, you cannot have talks. Otherwise, Russia and the West can work together. And Ukraine can keep its existence, its identity, without actually becoming a tool of war against one country or the other. So there has to be some kind of reconciliation eventually. I hope that Pakistan is there, of course. Countries like India, India's Modi, actually, remember that slogan, war rukwa di papa. Then Modi ji actually started war between the two countries just to get his students out. He recently went and tried his luck and he failed miserably. He went to Russia, Ukraine complained. He went to Ukraine, Russia got angry also. And now both are angry, right? With that kind of, stupid approach to comic strip approach to diplomacy. If you are going to try to do that, it might work in Bollywood movies, but it does not work in real life. Pakistan is a more smart country, a smarter country now. Pakistan could have actually contributed to some kind of urge for the reconciliation eventually. I hope that that happens because people are dying and any human life that is lost. Unfortunate that we are in the 21st century's first quarter is almost over, right? Or this new millennium, this new century. But we still haven't learned the value of human life. And that is something that Pakistan needs to speak out very clearly. And one more thing, I think Prime Minister did a great job of highlighting Pakistan's sacrifices in the war and terror.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do we have a few
We'll
seconds?
we'll have to take a short break, but we'll continue about that, of course, in these times of heightened tensions. Being a voice for the weak, being a voice for peace is what Pakistan has done. We'll continue, but after a short break. Stay tuned.